Good evening, listener, and welcome. Today you're about to hear three different tales from three different grand authors. And I'm not just talking about your typical creepypastas. Oh no, I'm talking about stories that defined years of horror. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Yeah, I'm definitely not doing that voice. Ah, boy. Hey everybody, Axel Stanley here, and today, as I just mentioned, you're about to hear three things that I consider to be terrifying. And yeah, of course, movies and video games are things that can be scary. And yeah, we have creepypastas nowadays, but in my defense, though, it is what it is. So, the three stories that I'm about to tell you, yeah, I'm actually going to have to tell you from the three different authors. So, in this case, yeah, sit back, relax, and of course, grab yourself a popcorn as I delve into the authors, and I will explain who they are and the stories that they bring to the table. Starting with the one and only Lewis Carroll, an English writer of children's fiction, and to some very yet few individuals who are watching this video may know that name for the one who created Alice in Wonderland and the sequel Through the Looking Glass. While not terrifying, to say the least, Lewis Carroll created a tale of interesting, twisting turns. While, as I just said, not exactly horrifying at the surface. However, upon reading, it actually gets very interesting. Reality bending. Heck, logic doesn't even exist. It's world, or at least it tells the tale of Alice and everything that she goes through. From just simply going down the rabbit hole, she descends into some very interesting, maddening events that not many people can say. Well, it just is what it is. And of course, this amazing tale got a sequel, and I'll admit I have not completely read the second one. The only thing that I do know of the book, however, or at least its sequel in this case, is the interesting Jabberwocky poem. But I'm not exactly Wikipedia, so what do I know? but, but yeah, from giant dodos talking to following the white rabbit saying that it's late. He's late, very important date. To very interesting things to drink and eat that change Alice's height and, well, so, yeah. Obviously, not too many things to write home about, so, yeah. Uh, However, what is actually interesting is that when writing this, Lewis Carroll was under the influence of, well, let's just say something very trippy, yeah, for YouTube's algorithm. So it's like, yeah, which in this case, I gotta wonder, what was in his head when he wrote this? Like, seriously. Like, obviously, yeah, this novel was devoid of all logic and had some very interesting fantasy setting. So, but, oh my god. And of course, for those actually watching this instead of just, well, listening to this, you may have noticed that the illustrations are very well done, as you might say. And, hey, it is what it is. And of course, this tale was definitely known like before the 1900s even was a thing. Which, hey, props for being a very good, well, night 18. Sorry, hang on. Apparently published at the year of 1865. Seriously, you do not get any older than this. And this was coming from a individual, again, very office rocker when he wrote this. So, if this is one of the most intriguing books because of its illustrations, its fantasy settings, its, well, livelihoods that have come to pass, then boy howdy, the Looking Glass is definitely another monster itself. Well, I did just say that I haven't read the sequel entirely. I am aware of its many interesting things that come of it. Like, for one, Alice becomes a queen. And of course, the Jabberwocky would be slayed and whatnot. So, in that regard, I think it's safe to say that not only could this be a very interesting, horrifying tale, but also is probably one of the greatest, or at least has one of the greatest protagonists around. Because Alice, well, things might be devoid of logic and whatnot. But with that being said, it just is what it is. So, well, of course, my favorite parts of the book are the illustrations and whatnot. Because the illustrations, they are done very well. And I just can't knock it. And of course, I will admit, my first introduction to Alice in Wonderland was through the Walt Disney Alice in Wonderland. But it is what got me into the book, or at least got me to what one of these days up and read the book, which I gotta admit, it is probably the most mind-bending things that I have ever read. Seriously. Do not read this while you have a headache. You're gonna be, you have a hurting head by the time that you're done reading it. So, yeah. I would definitely give this a huge recommendation for those who like their stories to be twisted, devoid of logic, and of course, a good fantasy tale. And as I mentioned, while not horrifying, I'm sure that there are going to be some things in this book that will kind of creep you out. To a sense of, well, let's just say, avoiding any particular cards with feet. And of course, don't let the Queen of Hearts catch you on the way out. So, wake up, or she comes to get you, the Queen of Hearts. Up next, we have ourselves a very interesting American writer and poet known as Edgar Allan Poe. And to any horror world lovers out there, well, boy, do I have something for you. Well, in the case of Edgar Allan Poe, sure, he did not live very long past his 40s, but at the end of the day, in the 1800s, when he did live, he wrote amazing, horrifying tales through poetry and whatnot. And unfortunately, because there's a whole lot of them, I'm actually going to dial it down to at least a couple of stories. One of which is the popular tale, and the other is the one that I've been introduced to. The first one I would like to call The Raven, or at least the most popular one, that is. The story tells of a talking raven's mysterious visit to a distraught lover, tracing the man's slow descent into madness. The lover, often identified as a student, at least according to it, is lamenting the loss of his love, Lenore. I think that's how you say it. Sitting on a bust of Pallas, the raven seems to further distress the protagonist with its constant repetition of the word nevermore. The poem, in this case, uses the great use of folk, mythology, religious, and classical references. And, oh boy, does the raven and the protagonist play off each other oh so well. And, hey, yeah, as I said, it's definitely one of the more popular tales by Edgar Allan Poe. So, if I can just recommend the popular one, then more power to you. And of course, give this one a read if this intrigues you. Or the summary I just told you intrigued you in some way. So, yeah, that this was definitely something. Not as interesting as the next one, though. Which brings us to the next tale, which I actually got introduced to when I was still in high school, which is known as Telltale Heart, which is a story about an unnamed narrator who endeavors to convince the reader of the narrator's sanity while simultaneously describing a murder. Oh, he said that the narrator had committed. The victim was an old man with a filmy, pale blue vulture eye. Or at least that's one way of describing said interesting victim. The narrator definitely heavily emphasizes how he carefully calculated his murder, attempting to perfectly kill said old man. Also dismembering him in a bathtub and hiding his body under the floorboards. But, however, and ultimately, the narrator's actions result in hearing the thumping sound of the dead man's beating heart. And if you think the description itself that I'm saying is something, then you need to read it for yourself, which you should go do. Seriously. Because in all honesty, my words cannot do this story justice because of how good it is. So, yeah, those are definitely my recommendations on what I should have you read if Edgar Allan Poe's stories are anything to go by. And trust me, I think you might get some chills just from reading these stories. Have fun sleeping. As for our next author who wrote said story, yeah, the American writer of weird the science, fantasy, and horror fiction. You know him, you love him, and the man on the image isn't lying to you. This be H.P. Lovecraft. And that now, this should be raising bells right away if you know that name. Oh yeah, this is that man who wrote probably one of the most famous, horrifying tales of all known proportions. And of course, created a legacy that is still being used by today. And of course, aside from controversial things behind the scenes, H.P. Lovecraft, and here's actually a fun fact, H.P. Lovecraft actually had some inspiration from Edgar Allan Poe, aka the last writer that we just looked at, which is interesting to say the least. So, with that being said though, what, H.P. Lovecraft? Oh, you cannot ask for a better recommendation of horror right here. But I'm gonna do my best. Well, he wrote some interesting stuff other than what it's known for. What this man single-handedly created, however, is most known as the famous Call of Cthulhu mythos. And, oh boy, I cannot do what his work get justice from just saying it alone, as I may have said. But I'm going to do my best regardless. And let me just say, from what I've read, oh boy, if you want no sleep, get reading. So, Cthulhu, or otherwise known as the living... Oh wait, sorry. Master of Vile, or the Great Dreamer, has definitely been practically the king of his own mythos, and is known as considered a massive hybrid of a human, octopus, and a dragon. Huh. He is usually depicted as hundreds of meters tall, with webbed arms, tentacles, and a pair of rudimentary wings on his back. And trust me, as much as I like to say that he's the only thing from the mythos, oh no, there are so many things to this mythos that get bigger than that. In this mythos, we have the great old ones, the outer gods, elder gods, and let me just say, yeah, it is quite the number of well, interesting manifestations to come from just one mythos. And yeah, sure, you got your usual suspects other than Cthulhu. There's also known as the Hydra, Mother of Pus, Niggeroth, Shabath Ka. You know what? I apologize in advance for butchering some of these names. But then you also have other famous ones like Solthik, Bass, Othar. Well, as I said, I can't say I know how to say these names. But if Cthulhu is the king of his mythos, then there is one who was the top of the food chain. Because if this thing were to awaken, it would be the end-all. Azoth, also sometimes known as the blind idiot god, is a dreamy monster whose dream is where the universe resides. Azoth is completely unaware of anything that's going on in his own dream. Well, hence his name, I imagine. So Azoth does shift into a slumber, causing reality to change. He is, or at least now, what considered known as the most powerful entity yet in the mythos, which unfortunately is followed up by his grandson, Yoga Soth, and of course is the creator and ruler of the Outer Gods. So I guess that makes Cthulhu third most powerful. As I am saying, however, where it is what it is. And you know what? The mythos is so much fun that I can't make sense of it. And you know what? Maybe it is better this way to be a little confused about the mythos. Because, trust me, this mythos will confuse you. And while confusing to most of people, I imagine those who read the tales will know of absolute madness. Of course, we'll actually be delving into the place of humanity and whatnot, as the stories are definitely known for. So, yeah, I can't really justify reading these, because you know what? As I said, you really ought to read them for yourself. But as far as I'm aware, if any of these creatures were to awaken, then Lord have mercy on our souls for, well, everything. Because there is no way in absolute can we survive. So, fellow reader, read if you dare. Or at least dare to delve into the madness that reeks within with Cthulhu and his mythos. So, And don't say I didn't warn you about the madness that it brings. Because, oh boy, there's a lot of it. But do beware of it. So, what did you guys think? Yeah. So, are you interested in any of the things I mentioned? Are you gonna go check them out for yourself? Well, leave your thoughts down in the comments, and of course, subscribe if you haven't to share the stuff that I post on anything that you post on. And of course, like the video if you did, and of course, don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated with my content. And of course, as always, I hope to see you guys stick to the journey, no matter how creepy it gets nowadays. I will see you guys later.